Professor Bryant, I had asked you about whether other liberal democracies are engaging in propaganda against their own population. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to finish your comments.
I wanted to just add that it depends on, I suppose, how you define propaganda. Like, all governments need to communicate to their citizens. All militaries need to tell and explain to their citizens why they are deploying people into conflicts and how they're using particular technologies and so forth. And they are probably going to put this in a way that advances what they are doing and explains it in a way that justifies it. We also have important efforts to, communicate during things like coronavirus and so on, crises. We need to be able to guide our citizens towards behaviors that are, pro-social and helpful for society, pro-health, and so on. And the military sometimes get involved in that. But how they were going to get involved is incredibly important. And we don't want to be stepping over that line into coercive and manipulative kind of practices that they would be using for foreign audiences. So that brings us back to the question of what techniques were used in Afghanistan and what's acceptable and what's not. And this is a really important discussion that we need to be having around ethics and propaganda.
So, Professor Robinson, I'm glad that Professor Bryant brought up this public affairs issue, because the public affairs was actually implicated in one of the military public affairs was implicated in one of the earlier reports by the Citizen, which found that public affairs had launched a plan to allow public affairs officers to use propaganda to change attitudes and behaviors among Canadians, as well as collect and analyze information from public social media accounts. So what can you tell me about that earlier report and what that means in relation to what Professor Bryant had been talking about? Did that cross a line?
Well, I think you're beginning to, to a certain degree, that's a recognition of reality of what public relations is actually really all about. And in a sense, being rather more honest than what was previously said to be the case. But I think the idea that the Canadian forces and forces of other democratic states have not been involved in manipulating public opinion for a very long time would be extremely naive, because, of course they do. And David Pugliese, who wrote this Revelations we've been talking about in the Ottawa Citizen, has also written about how the Canadian forces, and he's quite blunt about it, he says lied about the mission in Afghanistan and bent over backwards to try and persuade the Canadian public that everything was going swimmingly well when it wasn't. We've seen similar reports in the United States, where the United States official auditor, the Special Inspector General of Afghanistan Reconstruction, gave testimony to Congress in which he outright accused the US government of lying to the US people of the situation in Afghanistan. And we know of many other manipulative sort of propaganda techniques which are used by militaries. In America, for instance, huge subsidies are given to Hollywood whereby you get sort of free use of military resources if the Department of Defense happens to like the message which is in your movie. And there are vast links like this between the military structures and the media, Hollywood, TV, so on and so forth, all of which are designed to persuade the public to have a favorable attitude, both of the military and of whatever mission the military is being involved in. So, are rest of liberal democracies involved in military propaganda? Yes, absolutely. They always have been and are very deeply involved.
Sometimes they do cross a line, though. So, Professor Bryant, there was this bizarre incident last year in Nova Scotia where military information operations sent around a fake letter warning about wolves, and then even went into the woods with speakers to play wolf sounds. We've got about 30 seconds. Brief comment on that situation.
Well, I think the major takeaway there is that it seems to be a symptom of a wider breakdown of oversight and leadership and guidance and decent training, and just about everything. But I would say that it also is an illustration of the kinds of techniques that were taking place in Afghanistan and that never should be deployed in a domestic context. And I think there's this blurring and merging and bleeding because, governments and militaries are trying to experiment with new ways of going ahead.
We've got to go to commercial break, but we'll be right back.